Welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie, and we are going to start with just some previous lessons, review of each one, and then we will dive into reading today's lesson. So, just before we dive in, for those of you who are new to the show, we take every single morning and read through a Course in Miracles, and we have 365 lessons. So we've got a lesson every day of the year. And these morning shows are really dedicated to the cultivation of you and me. And it's in a very particular intelligence. We have spent so much of our lives cultivating the intellectual intelligence, the IQ, ever since we were 3, 4 years old, being in school. And even before that, learning to speak and learning letters and sounds and colors and animals. We have been cultivating the intellect since childhood. And so we have rarely spent time cultivating the other part of our brain, the right hemisphere of the brain, which is the emotional intelligence. And so in the evening shows, that is what we discuss. We discuss with guests, also solo, and within the community on like YouTube particularly. And so we also do these morning shows, which is cultivating this different part of the human intelligence, which is spiritual intelligence. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into a review of some of the preceding lessons and then today's lesson, so that we can start off our day orienting ourselves to a greater truth than what is here right now in this moment. And we'll go ahead and dive in right now. Lesson 91, miracles are seen in light. Miracles are seen in light, and light and strength are one. That's lesson 92. Lesson 93, light and joy and peace abide in me. Lesson 94, I am as God created me. Lesson 95, I am one self united with my Creator. Lesson 96, salvation comes from my one self. Lesson 97, I am spirit. Lesson 98, I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. Lesson 99, salvation is my only function here. Lesson 100, my part is essential to God's plan for salvation. Lesson 101, God's will for me is perfect happiness. Lesson 102, I will share God's will for happiness for me. And today's lesson 103, God being love is also happiness. Happiness is an attribute of love. It cannot be apart from it, nor can it be experienced where love is not. Love has no limits, being everywhere, and therefore joy is everywhere as well. Yet can the mind deny this is so, believing that there are gaps in love where sin can enter, bringing pain instead of joy, believing there are gaps in love where sin can enter, bringing pain instead of joy. This strange belief will limit happiness by redefining love so limited and introducing opposition in what has no limit and no opposite. Fear is associated then with love. And its results become the heritage of minds that think that what they have made is real. These images, with no reality and truth, bear witness to the fear of God, forgetting being love. He must be joy. This basic error we will try again to bring to truth today and teach ourselves. God being love is also happiness. To fear Him is to be afraid of joy. Begin your periods of practicing today with this association, which corrects the false belief that God is fear. It also emphasizes happiness belongs to you because of what He is. Allow this one correction to be placed within your mind each waking hour today, then welcome all the happiness it brings as truth replaces fear, and joy becomes what you expect to take the place of pain. God being love, it will be given you. Bolster this expectation frequently throughout the day and quiet all your fears with this assurance, kind and wholly true. God being love is also happiness, and it is happiness I seek today. I cannot fail because I seek the truth. I want to return to the second paragraph here. It's so powerful. Y'all, lesson 103 today. God being love is also happiness. And there's a fundamental intrinsic link between God, love, and joy. And so there's almost an if then process of talking about the IQ, the intellectual intelligence. This is where there's the kind of the logical reasoning, if then this. So if X, then Y. And so there's this logical progression. If God is love, then joy is the outcome of experiencing the love of God and thus experiencing God Himself. Yet we have fundamentally changed the definition of love, and we have an altered view on not just then what love is, but also then who God is. And so the step to work through is, okay, well, what is really, really love? And thus, what is really, really God? And obviously you can kind of work at it from both angles. Who is God? What is God? And then what does love really mean? And so I want to touch on this second paragraph. Fear is associated then with love, and its results become the heritage of minds that think what they have made is real. These images, with no reality and truth, bear witness to the fear of God, forgetting being love, He must be joy. So we fundamentally tie we're convoluted and corrupted in our thinking in so many ways that, well, how can I actually derive joy from love when love is intertwined with fear? And y'all, this is what's so interesting, is that we haven't just had a distorted view of love as it pertains to God Himself, but so much of love has been corrupted here in the physical world and in physical relationships. If you have a bad romantic relationship, if you have an inappropriate relationship with your parent where maybe they've actually sought you as emotional respite for themselves rather than them being an emotional haven for you as the child. And now the dynamic of parent child has completely flipped on its head. Those are just two examples of where we can see so much corruption in physical relationships in the lateral horizontal plane that then changes the way that we engage vertically with God. And thus, the very definition of love itself is distorted. And therefore, God Himself is distorted in our eyes as well. And so, when we're talking about fear, fear is associated then with love. We're talking about fear that is a very different kind of fear than this idea of fear actually being reverence. There's a concept in biblical text where it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I wanted to look into that because I've heard so much and actually experienced that if you're not in love, effectively you're in fear. And that's the opposite of love, is fear in so many ways. And so I was like, okay, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. What does it actually mean to fear God? And effectively, that word fear in Greek is meaning reverence. And so when we fear God, that is actually an appropriate reverence oriented towards who He is and what He represents, versus the type of fear that makes us run and hide. And you see this also in the biblical text where it says Adam was afraid and hid from God. So there's a difference between a fear and a reverence that actually draws and attracts us to the very thing that is the object of our fear versus the thing that causes us to run and hide from which we fear. And so this conversation is so important, because if we have the wrong fear associated with God, it is going to cause separation rather than unity and union with God. And so, as we're talking this morning, where it says God being love, it actually really beckons us to actually consider, what is my definition of love? What does love mean to me? What does God being love represent to me? And so it's such an important question, y'all, for this Monday morning as we're going about our day and going about our schedules, to just take this moment to pause and what does love mean to you? I was hosting a knowing retreat I guess this was last year in Las Vegas, and there was couples there in attendance, and I asked them this question: what does love mean to you? Every couple, in terms of the unit, had a different definition of love, but the thing that was most notable to me was that every person in that unit had a different definition of love. So therefore, when wife said to husband, I love you, and husband said to wife, I love you, they had fundamentally different definitions. So y'all, until we actually get clear on what does love mean, then when we actually go and try to act out love with another person, we could actually be, this is where you get the ships in the night concept of, I'm seeking to love you. You're seeking to love me, but it's not how I give nor how I receive love. And so, therefore, we wonder, well, man, why is relationship so hard? We're starting with fundamentally different views and different interpretations of love itself. And so, when we consider the fact that God being love, well, what does love even mean? And so I just want to encourage every single one of us, to sit and think on that question. What type of love is God himself? And what would it look like for me to embody that type of love for the rest of the world? In fact, I did a little study on love last year as well. And I found that there's actually 7 different words, Greek words, for what in the English language we say love is. And there's agape. There's which is kind of like this universal love. There's a familial love. There's actually a love for self. There's a brotherly love. There's so many different types of love. And so when we talk about God being love, man, is it just such a beautiful thing that love is so much bigger than we ever thought there was. And flautus is actually the love for self, which I thought was really, really unique, because when we hear people in today's culture say you've got to love yourself, that concept of love that they're talking about so often manifests as abdication of responsibility. It's selfish in so many ways. So when we hear people saying you've got to love yourself, we have a very different understanding than in the Bible, where it says love your neighbor as you love yourself. That is actually a very, very high call and very different than the type of love that we hear about in society today. So, y'all, what would it look like to reclaim the definition of love that is embodied in God himself? To be wanted, to be valued apart from what we do, and to be ultimately cherished, where who we are is never questioned just by what we do. And rather, what we do is an outpouring and a result of knowing fundamentally who we are and who God says that we are, which is in love. And that produces joy. That produces happiness. There's this concept of the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of God in us is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There's 8 or 9 different manifestations of the presence of God living in us. And so perhaps that in and of itself is a mirror for us to look in and just question, am I actually living and breathing with God in me? Are those fruits? You shall know a tree by its fruit. So what are the fruits in my life? Is love one of those? And it's multivarious, I guess you could say, in terms of love means so many different things. And so love perhaps could be a study for us just this whole week. And maybe we'll talk about it in our evening show tonight. Um, I'm just going to jump over here in the chat, in the comments, just saying hello to a few friends. William, good morning from San Diego. Oh, I love that. Man in the Hat, good morning. I'm so glad to see you. Bank Top, good morning. Um, mm, Man in the Hat says, we fear God because he is the only one that can damn our soul. We live for God's will out of love and fear of God. And it's that reverence, that beautiful, beautiful reverence of knowledge and relationship with God. God's definition of love is different from our emotional definition of love. That's so, so, so good. And thus it really warrants. I think that we'll talk about this tonight, Man in the Hat. What does love really, really means. So I'm excited to chat further about that with y'all tonight. But for now, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining on The Knowing Show. I will see you this evening for those of you who join. If you are watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, feel free to come over to, it's just YouTube/The Knowing Podcast. Would love to have you come join us over there. We go live every evening for the most part at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So I'll plan to see you all there tonight. And